I just moved from Europe to here like 3 months ago, a bit more now. So I've decided to just do something a bit wild. It's a bit driven to like students and junior game designer, but I hope that there will be information for everyone. So that's a pitch that I do usually in schools in France and in UK, and usually it's like 4 to 5 hours. So I just had to shorter it. So hopefully I will have enough time. So talking about me quickly, so I've been graduated from a school in France of game design and project management. I've worked at Ubisoft as my first real experience as a level designer in 2010. Then I worked for GameLoft for like 3 years, and that was very important here because at GameLoft I was game content manager in Paris, but really early on they start making me moving over to other GameDev studio over the world just to support the team. So I work in Spain, I work in China, I work in Japan for like a year, and I really enjoy like traveling, meeting new type of studios, let's say, or like new way of thinking. And so I continue this kind of journey. And after GameLoft, I worked for Natural Motion on CSR2 for like 5 years in London. And after 5 years, I was okay, it's time to move on again and just find something new. And when I get contacted by Ubisoft in Halifax, I was like, okay, that's the type of challenge I want. And so far, I haven't been disappointed. So here I am. So usually, as I said, when I talk to students, it's kind of open question, but here, because of time, I will try to go faster. But I want to get their opinion on what a game designer do. So I got various responses. But basically the answer, and here I know it's not the right time to just quote someone from Blizzard, but I made this speech before. But yeah, like, it's true that in the idea of people, usually game designer is someone that come up with all the ideas and straightforward just solve all the problems and stuff on his own. Where Jay Wilson, in his way, just say, yeah, it's more about like communication about the team and not having the ideas, but more about how to solve problems and stuff. And I kind of agree with him. And moreover, like game designer is just like the general title. And nowadays, especially with mobile coming in, there is more and more like sub-genre. And that's again like one of the questions I ask the student very often of like, okay, except the game designer and maybe like level designer, what other title you can think of? And here I just start to provide a huge list of like all the kind of design style design role you can have. So game designer is a general one. Economy designer, I think one of the talk was about economy just before. Balance designer, game content manager is something you have more and more. So that's something I've done at GameLoft, for example, where you are in charge of, let's say, the roadmap and make sure that the team is going in the right direction. So at Ubisoft, that's how it works. For example, we have the HQ in Paris, and they are always here to support the project and the team. Live Ops, you have some people talking about it. Narrative designer, I haven't seen so many, but that's something that's very interesting as well. Gameplay designer, you also have heard of it. The quest designers for MMOs and stuff like this, and you have more and more, and nowadays like companies tend to just extend these roles. So yeah, like again, I just like to break down what is the daily routine of a game designer, and again, it's not like just sitting behind his desk and creating stuff all day long. It's more about communication and being open-minded and then start to talking to others and make sure that you can understand people's needs and you can provide solutions. So I think the first thing, and I think in every company I've worked for, I had this kind of thing which is the stand-up. So every morning, just like a small group up with people from your team, from like yourselves, let's say, programmers, artists, and you just say, okay, what you've been up to, what are you currently doing, any problems, what are you going to work on, etc., etc. Then in terms of like spec creation, again, like the common idea is just like, okay, I just jump straight away and start creating docs for the team and stuff. But usually you start to like breaking down this thing into step by step. So like end of document, for example, is something most of the time made by the creative director or like any high stakeholders that just come with a vision. So usually split into like vision, anti-vision. So As a player, I want to be able to do this. As a player, I certainly don't want to have this thing, etc., etc. So I receive this brief, or sometimes I make it, and then based on that, I have to do a one-pager. So I just have to sum up my idea of anything, any feature, into one page. And anyone, even if he's not a game designer, should be able to read that page and understand where you want to go. Sure, you will have some questions, but at least you got the overall idea. When it's validated, so usually by your lead or by anyone, you go to the next step, which is like the main spec. So you go much further down with like behaviors, etc., etc. And when it's done and validated, you go down to something that's a bit more unknown, which is user stories. So as I said earlier, like as a player, you just break everything you have into tasks for anyone in the team. So I don't know, like if I say as a player I want to be able to jump in my game, so that would be a task for a programmer. The programmer will be able to cost it, and then the producer, blah blah blah. I'm just entering the full loop of production, but you have to help your team about and doing that. Then of course, when everything has been done and it's ongoing and made by the team, you have to review step by step, supporting your team, making sure that you are going in the right direction. And yeah, we talk about feedback right after, but yeah, you just support them and you test them all along as soon as possible. And moreover, like for example, we are on a mobile team, so on mobile, on device, testing it again and again and again. Here you just take the role of tester in some ways, but it's very, very important, and sometimes people tend to forget about it. As soon as they have shipped the spec, they just like, okay, I'm done, remember that. And yeah, the last thing is to be a kind of producer in some way, facilitate meetings. So you are in charge of like creating the meetings, invite people, and when you are in the meeting, just like start to introduce the topic, making sure that everyone can speak, not interrupting, etc., etc. So here I just have like a full explanation of like meeting facilitation, because there is a lot of like psychology, mindfulness, etc. But today, sadly, I will have to skip that part. And again, like here, I think it just lands into like the specialties of like every type of game designers, because nowadays, I think because we are so specialized, you don't have to be all-rounded. I think back in the days, you had to be a bit like artists, know how to program, know how to use tools, etc. I think nowadays, yeah, you have like specialties, but you still have the base common ground, which is Microsoft Office, of course, PowerPoint, etc., etc. Unity is a real big plus. Again, like to be able to prototype quickly your ideas and to be able to show and demonstrate anything you have in mind. And then you have to be familiar with any like sharing tools or any like bug trackers and stuff like this. So that's very important to at least having an idea, because I think in every company I work for, this is one of the things that comes up in interview really often, which is, okay, usually what type of bug tracking are you using? Is it Jira, is it like whatever? And yeah, as I said, I think the only common ground with like all the game design specialties is the communication. I think I just tried to transmit it from my previous slide, but it's something very important here, to just like being able to communicate with everyone. So from like people from your team, from people above you, not being too scared, not hiding too much, which is sometimes very difficult. And even with people from marketing, just those guys are going to sell your idea. So if you ignore them or if you don't take into account this thing, you could be in trouble. Just time. Yeah, also like here is something I've really experienced over time with like students in game design school and stuff, is people tend to go crazy. Even if they don't want to, they tend to go crazy really quickly. And I always try to just like refocus the scope to really simple steps and simple things, and try to stick to original plans if possible. Don't hesitate to break your rules and just like iterate again and again until something works. But you know, I think I had this conversation like 2 weeks ago with someone saying, oh, are you not frustrated that some of your design has been washed away and just disappeared? And I think, yeah, over 10 years, there are so many designs that have disappeared and gone, and I don't mind, because if something new comes out of it and I learn something, it's not completely disappeared. Yeah, like, as I say, like try to be the player is very important, because again, like, for most of you, like I talk about the students here, you are not going to work on games that you are in love with. You know, like I think the first game I worked on was My Little Pony, and I have to tell you, I'm not a huge fan of this brand, but still, like, it was a challenge, and I had to say, okay, if I'm the target, let's say a small teenager, I know, like an 8-year-old girl and stuff, what would I like to have in that game? And I start making research, and I start to just understand the principle. And as a result, I've done a lot of things differently that I would have done if I was the target. And I think that's something, again, like a mistake that we do sometimes, and we need to be careful of. Am I good? Okay. And yeah, and the second part is what we call the tutorial. How do you transmit your information to the player? And that's something also that can be a bit tricky, and not taking the player by the hands too much is very important, because if you have like 25 an hour tutorial, you are going to lose your audience. But at the same time, if you just drop the player in your universe straight away, you are going to lose it as well. So that's something, again, that will be supported by, by the testing. And testing again with everyone, with everything, all the time. So I think, of course, the first best tester you have access to is yourself, and you test your stuff, and you're okay, as an experienced player, does it work? Yes, no. And you know, like the story I always tell is that, for example, back in the days in Ubisoft, I think you all know Rayman, right? The old 2D Rayman, the golden rule was like, if the level designer who made the levels can finish his level, let's validate. As a result, the game was very, very difficult, and the more you progress through the game, the more insane it becomes. Of course, because when you make the game yourself, it's much more easier to finish it. So with yourself is the first step, but then you have to test with your team, test with your friend, test with anyone. And if you can, based on the type of studio you join, if you can make some big play session, you know, like for example at Natural Motion in London, we were hiring VIPs into like what's the word? You know, like glass, where we were hiding behind and we were just checking their results and stuff, just to make sure that they are not like scared of us and etc. And that's so useful. Like it can change entire design, it can change so many things. So remember just to test your game all the time, even if you are sure about something, just test it again and again until it's bulletproof. And it will never be. Yeah, and as I said, so like now I'm in the industry for like 11 years now, but I've spent 10 years in mobile games, and I had the chance to start in just before the golden era of free-to-play. So when I joined GameDev, it was still like Java games, like 2D stuff. So again, they hired me for like my level design expertise, and it was very different. When nowadays, as a game designer, you have to integrate all the specificities that you talked about just earlier, and you have to be really aware of that. And that's very specific, and I know that for some people it's very difficult to accept. And I know that when I was a student myself, I was like, what, mobile? I don't care, like, what's that thing? But nowadays it's very important, and it's a big part of the industry. And when you look at console and PC, they take example of mobile games and successful features in mobile games. So having a big knowledge of that is very important. And yeah, I think I will skip that part because you sum it up really, really nice. But yeah, like UX, UI is very important. And even if usually when you join a company, you have UX artists, UI artists, you need to just like work with them. And you know, like in our studio at Ubisoft, our UI artists are fantastic, but we have to work in combination all the time. And KPIs, yeah, like I mean, again, I don't want to spend too much time on that one. And yeah, so like to conclude that, how to be a good game designer. I think the first golden rule is to be curious, and you know, like I saw like earlier, like a lot of you guys are playing a lot. It's very good. It's very important, but I think it's not the only things to do. I mean, video game knowledge is very important, but for example, in my interview for Ubisoft Halifax, they asked me tons of questions about board games, card games, and many different type of games. But also like about art, cinema, painting, books, whatever. So just be curious in general about everything, because that will be always something useful for your design, for your ideas, etc., etc. Communication as well. As I say, in my school in France, when I came back as a teacher, I had to recruit new students, and we had like some potential applicants that were really experienced in terms of like tools, etc. But they were so bad at talking and communicating that we had to get rid of them because they were failing life as a game designer, because communication is super important. Writing skill, yeah, as I say, like it's also important to be able to transmit your ideas. Having great ideas is very important and very efficient, but if you have no way to communicate them to your team, you will go nowhere, sadly. And yeah, and that's me. So I think, I don't know how long does I have in terms of questions, but if you have any questions.
At what point do you know?
At what point do you know that an idea is like actually working, like when it's like in testing or whatever?
Thank you very much. I don't know if I will do that every time. No, yeah, it's a very good point. I think it depends on at which scales we are talking about. So if it's like student scale, I think you have to create your own metrics. If it's studio scale, I think my colleague, like the first presentation about data telemetry, was one of the aspects. So like, usually, you know, like nowadays when I don't know if people are aware about this, but we are soft launching games, right? So like you release the games only in few countries, and what you do at this moment is that you just try your KPIs. So basically you are just trying stuff until you reach the metrics you want to have. Let's say I want 35% retention. I want my players to remain in the game for at least 12 days. And as long as I don't reach that thing, that 35%, I won't launch worldwide. So you know, that kind of example. I think you have to set yourself your stuff, but yeah. I think yeah, there is no perfect answer. I think it's based on your own guts and own feelings, and also you will learn over time. But yeah, like just fix goals yourself, and slowly but surely you see how long does it take to reach those ones, and then you will see. Any other question? Yes. I think I will sit behind us.
Pertaining to debugging, assume if that is appropriately within the scope of the theme, pertaining to debugging and the like, all right, with regard to the communication and the like for game design, what are the best ways to minimize the times, well, to be more efficient with debugging?
So if I understand your question, is that how to optimize your time regarding debugging, is that correct?
Yeah, debugging, particularly in cases where bugs are hard to reproduce. I know that debugging is something that would benefit from the model of game design that you suggested, so hence the question.
Yeah, I think, let me think about it quickly. Because I think, yeah, you have to work in tandem with the QA, QC, like tester, right? And usually what you do is that when you prepare your feature, you have to do what we call test case, right? And so it depends on companies. Like for example, at Ubisoft, the designer is working on a test case when in Natural Motion, for example, the tester was doing the test case. But the idea is to say, okay, here's the scope of my feature, and here is the, I don't know, like 10, 20, 30 things, and here's the the different way you have, like the repro step if you want. And when you give this feature to the tester, you will just go to the test case and one by one check everything. And of course, sometimes you can still have bugs, but like I think here you go outside your boundaries, and it just belongs to tester doing their thing and their job, and you have to support them. It's out of your league, let's say.
So it was a little bit beyond scope.
What do you mean?
I mean, the question. So it was a little bit beyond scope?
I mean, as I say, like you do your test case, right? And if you have bugs coming out of there, yeah, that's beyond scope. But
So you mentioned a bunch of skills that the game designer should have. What is the one key skill? If you could condense it down to one important skill, and I think I know what it is. Somebody who's a game designer who's now become an instructor, I want my students to hear it again. What do you think is the most important skill a game designer needs to have?
so I will answer, but first, what will be yours for you? Like you say,
For me, it'd be communication.
yeah.
If you don't have that, nothing else matters. You
Yeah.
can have the best ideas or the best solutions. If you can't explain them, can't write them down, it won't matter. I wanted to hear them from you though.
Yeah, no,
They
but
don't listen to me, so.
I can still like, yeah, say you are right. I mean, communication is the right. So I would say communication and being proactive. Like anticipate things and being able to react fast enough.
Self-directed.
Yeah, I mean, self-directed, yes and no, because sometimes you could be too much self-directed and just going completely out of topics. But yeah, I think communication and proactivity are like the two elements that works really well.
Thank you.
No worries.
Anybody else? Anyone else? Something?
That's it. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.